So how many of you have ever had to go in for a job interview or are working for a job, trying to get a job interview or trying to work on a resume or whatever the case may be? A lot of people who are aware of this, doing a job interview is not the funnest thing in the world for, most of the time. Trying to work on a resume is not the funnest thing in the world. Trying to get, like for an internship or anything along those lines, or even like for like an application for like a scholarship or anything along those lines is not fun to deal with. Um, not fun at all. And yeah. Um, so I've had to deal with that several times when it comes to like job applications. So you go in, you do the interview, and then they never call you back, or you send in the application and you never hear from them. All that fun stuff. Fun, fun, fun. And depending on the job, you can kind of tell that right off the bat. The person that's interviewing you or talking to you or accepting your application or whatever the case may be is just basically going to be like, oh, like looks you up and down to a degree and probably be like, depending on like how you're dressed or how you're acting or the way you came in and talked to them or whatever, are either going to not hire you or you're going to get a call back and you're going to get the interview, but you may not get hired. um uh or they're going to make you go through the ropes in order to get hired. So this video is going to be about, this is obviously about the class internships round 2, which is going to be, of course, about, during the second round of internships after the, after class 1A get their provisional licenses. And I am going to go over a little bit of like what, Shoto and Katsuki are going over in regards to the like remedial license exams, license training. So really the only ones that we learn about where they get to go for an internship are for the kids. Izuku, Kirishima, Sue, and Uraka. Those are the only 4 that we know where they go. And then, Shoto and Bakugo, of course, are off doing their remedial license exam, so therefore that leaves the other 14 students with, did they do anything? Did they not go and do anything? We don't ever find out. It's never stated. I don't think it's ever stated whether or not they actually do go and, go and do an internship somewhere. The main difference, of course, between this internship and the original internship, where, just after the sports festival, is that in the sports festival, it was, the heroes watched, and then the heroes sent in requests for the different students, different offers for the students to come and, of course, intern with them. As I went over in the previous internship video, they got different offers and such like that. And then, of course, for those that didn't get either very many or only got none, we, of course, have the, the list of, 40 approved workplaces that they can go to that kind of, partner with the school. And such, so that way, the different students can start to get an idea of, different aspects of being a hero and start seeing what being on the job is going to be like, which is a very good idea, as opposed to just, oh, you graduate from high school and like, oh, you're a hero now. There you go. Nope, there you go. You're a hero now. Go ahead. So it's like, no, it makes perfect sense for them to go and do like an internship. Also, this is something that's a little more familiar in Japan to a degree than in the U.S. They, of course, have, different types of training and such like that you go through in Japan as well. I mean, here in America, we do have like technical schools and stuff like that you can go through as well, that work with like technical trades and such like that, or you can do internships at different businesses and such like that along with your studying, which, depending on what you're trying to do, can be either very nice or not helpful at all, or somewhere in the middle, or extremely stressful. It all depends on what it is that you're trying to do. But of course, the 4 students that do go and do the work studies, as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking mostly about them and the different aspects of what they do during the work studies, which basically just means I kind of get to, dissect the Shihei Seikai arc. The, Hideout Raid arc, or the, well, not the Hideout Raid arc, the, Yakuza arc, whichever one you want to refer to it as, where they get to meet Eri. Kind of means I get to dissect that a little bit. I'm not going to go over every single bit of it, because there's certain things that don't necessarily pertain to the internship itself, but it's other things that happen during the internship. And then I will go over kind of like what Bakugo, and Shoto are doing at that point in time in regards to their remedial license exams. So let's just start with Tsu and Uraraka. So at the beginning of the time frame, they all end up meeting, the big three. They meet Mirio, Togata, and, Amajiki, and they meet Nejire. And, they're like, oh, well, we can take down these guys. And they fight against Mirio, and he just, like, wipes the floor with him. And, after doing that, he then, talks to Izuku and, talks to the rest of the class. And they're just like, well, you're going to do workplace studies again. And that's what they do. They all sign up for the different workplace studies, or they all start looking into different places. And Nejire basically just goes to Tsu and Uraraka, because Izuku is the first one out of the four to get the workplace study, and I'll go over him a little bit. But Tsu and Ochako are like, well, what can we do for an internship? We don't really have any connections. Uraraka's like, well, I guess I could go back to Gunhead, but she didn't really want to. And, Tsu could have always gone back and done some more with Selkie, but they probably want to do something that's a little bit closer to the school, since they still have classes that they have to deal with. That's also another thing that they point out, is that these internships will also be affecting your classwork, because you have to be out of class to go and do the internships. And that will affect your grades. So you still have to be able to keep up your grades, and if your grades slip too far or something like that, then you can't do the work internships anymore. So it's more of the first one's required and the third one is required. In regards to the third internships, that'll be in the next internship video I do. But the second one is more of you have the ability to do it depending on what else is going on. And, Tsu and Ochako end up getting the offer. Nejire comes to them and says, hey, I would like to, recommend you guys to work with, Ryuko, who is, of course, the giant, the hero, the dragon woman, who I love, who is awesome, who's, at the time, she's the number 10 hero spot. And she has her agency and everything, and Nejire is one of her other work study students, kind of one of her interns at that point in time. And she has a few other people that work with her, a few other sidekicks and such that work with her that we see a little bit more later on. But Tsu and Ochako go and join that agency and work with the two of them. And they work on trying to defeat the different villains, because there's a villain that gigantifies themselves using their quirk and using Trigger. And, Tsu and Ochako work together on their combo move, Meteor, Fafroskis. Don't ask, I don't know. It appears to be like, Tsu, is like jumping from meteor to meteor that Uraraka is like holding up with her, chunks of concrete that Uraraka is floating and, throwing them at the enemy. And, they take down that enemy, and they do start to see that, Nejire very much seems to like the two of them. Nejire is, of course, a little bit more of she's good with her power, and she can focus down on stuff, but she is also very much of an airhead, and I love it because she's adorable. And I love the friendship that they show between her and Toga and Amajiki. I just find their relationship so adorable. And of course, Ryuko, of course, has the ability to turn into a giant dragon, which is freaking awesome. And, she's got seems to be hard scales around her that help protect her and such like that. So for all intents and purposes, she ate a Zoan devil fruit that allows her to turn into a dragon. I like her. She's awesome. And she seems to very much care for the girls, care for Nejire. She's very familiar with Nejire, and she seems to like Ochako and Tsu quite a bit. And Nejire's power, her quirk, is that she can manipulate energy waves that come out of her body. And she uses that to, create these different energy waves that look like electrical force waves that she can use to, blow her opponent away or, incapacitate her opponent, depending on how she's using them. I may do a video at some point where I talk about, the current big three, who by technicality, via current timeline of the manga, should have graduated already and gone on to become sidekicks and or heroes in their own right at this point in time. But that's not, of course, what happens. What ends up happening is, they then get called in to work on the case that's being done by the Night Eye Agency. And I will pick up from that after I talk about Kirishima. So Kirishima is, of course, the one of the other ones that, of course, gets the work study. He turns out that Amajiki, Tamaki Amajiki, wanted to invite Kirishima to come and do work study with Fat Gum at his agency in Osaka. And Kirishima accepts without hesitation, and he goes off and he meets with Fat Gum. And I love the name of Fat Gum's agency. It's the BMI hero. He's, the body mass index hero. And he's very surprised that Amajiki actually brought someone to the agency because, Amajiki is this, shy thing that was just, hides in the corner all the time. Sun eater. And which is adorable. Amajiki is just so cute. I'm also the person who just I hear different voices all over the place when I'm watching anime, particularly when they're done by Funimation and stuff like that, because that's mainly where I listen to the anime from. And I find it so hilarious that Amajiki in the English dub is, if I remember this correctly, he's voiced by the same guy that voices Senku from Dr. Stone, which just makes it so funny. It just makes it so funny. Amajiki, oh my god, I'm gonna hide by the wall. Senku, no, bring me that explosive. I have to fix something. Very different characters, but very funny. And they're also paired up with the same guy that voices Mirio also voices Taiju in Dr. Stone, which I just find hilarious. But there's a lot of crossover voices in the anime, of course, because, they're all done by the same, so many of them are done by the same studio, so that makes perfect sense. But back to the actual manga. But side note for Fat Gum, I am working on a video where I want to talk about the body images that heroes tend to show in My Hero, and I mentioned this in other videos where I want to talk about that. And in regards to that, I will be talking about Fat Gum in that as well, along with several of the other female heroes and other heroes that they show throughout the series and the different way that they're depicted throughout the series. But that'll be a different video. But Kirishima talks with Fat Gum, and he's like, yeah, I saw the way that you fought at the sports festival, and I was pretty impressed with it, and I liked, you seem to show, quite a bit of chivalry and everything. And that's one of the other reasons why Kirishima likes to, likes Fat Gum, is because Fat Gum does tend to be kind of this, manly but chivalrous type hero. And Fat Gum is also I like your spunk, kid. You got spunk. You're spunky, and I like it. That's just funny. He says that, Kirishima says, Forth kind of also liked me for that same reason, but I want to prove that I can do more than just that. Prove that I've got more than just spunk, that I've actually got what it takes, because he wants to be like his hero, Crimson Riot. And, he then, signs on to be, do his internship with Fat Gum and work alongside Tamaki, and then we see them going around when they're on patrol in the streets. In the Isuhei Market. I apologize if I pronounce any of the Japanese names wrong. I apologize for that. But they're walking around the market, and Fat Gum's pretty popular around the area because this is one of the areas, of course, where his agency patrols. And Amajiki is probably not his only sidekick. He's probably got other sidekicks all over the area that are out and running about, or even some other full-fledged heroes that maybe work for him out and about in the area. But Fat Gum gets lots of free food and everything because part of his quirk is, of course, I think it was called, I don't remember exactly the exact name of it, but it was fat absorption or something like that allows him to, he has so much fat built up around his body that he can use it to just, absorb any attacks that come at him. And then we see later on, during the, the raid, when they're, attacking the Yakuza, when they're doing the raid there, we see him release all of that energy at one point, and it's he uses it to build up all of the energy that he's been attacked with, and then he can release all that in one giant go, and then he has to build up his fat again and build up his energy again. But he uses his fat to, of course, absorb the attacks whenever he's attacked, physical force attacks. And he also seems to be able to contain like explosions to a degree, and it doesn't really seem to hurt him. I would also take into effect that his costume is probably designed to be kind of very flexible, but also quite durable to be able to help withstand the attacks that he takes. And of course, what ends up happening is, they're walking around and like, they're all talking to the people and like waving at Fat Gum and, everything. And like, he's just, eating food that he keeps getting. Because he has to keep his body mass index up in order for his quirk to work as well as it can. And we also see at the same time there is a villain, group of villains that try to attack. I think they try to like rob something or whatever. And Fat Gum and Red Riot and Sun Eater, I still have allergies, I apologize, fight the villains. And, Fat Gum is able to just like, take the attack and like absorb it, like wraps it around them and, absorbs the attack. And, Sun Eater is able to use his quirk. His quirk allows him to, he can manifest characteristics of things that he has eaten. And it appears not to only be organic material, because we see him do this a lot with food. Like he'll eat chicken, so he can have like, like claws that come out of his feet that are like chicken claws, which chickens can have very sharp claws. And then he, of course, can have like wings come out of his back, and he has like, he likes to eat like squid or something like that, or octopus, so he's got like tentacles that he can call upon. He probably has a very, obviously him being a vegan or a vegetarian would probably not be all that conducive to doing what he needs as a hero. So I would hope that he at least has a wide range of food that he likes to eat, because that would make things a lot better in regards to like how he can use his quirk. And he, of course, uses that. I actually kind of came up with a devil fruit that's very similar to this, but that'll be a completely different video. And what ends up happening is, Jiki, of course, uses, Sun Eater uses his quirk to, fight down the villains. And Kirishima goes off, and he's also trying to fight down the villains. And Kirishima actually ends up cornering one of these villains that has a quirk that allows him to produce blades out of his body. The villain takes a form of trigger that increases his power. And Kirishima is, of course, goes into his, his super move, Red Riot, Unbreakable, where he just continually takes hits, and he keeps like continuously like hardening himself again and again and again, to be able to absorb the hits and protect the civilians that are behind him. Because he's like got the guy cornered in an alley, and he's trying to prevent any of the civilians from getting hurt. Because of course that's just the way that Kirishima is, regardless of whether or not he was trying to be a hero. And, Kirishima had actually kind of tried to talk down the villain. And that is also just something that Kirishima would do. He would try to talk down this villain to try to make them surrender, so that way nobody else gets hurt. And also, like, if you surrender, then it's actually slightly better for you, because we didn't, you weren't trying to evade attack, you weren't trying to evade capture, we were able to stop you. He's trying to talk the guy down. And I will say this, I've heard that, like, people are like, oh, Kirishima has to be the spy because he tried to talk down a villain. I'm like, police officers and different, agencies and stuff like that deal with criminals all the time always try to talk down the person. That is part of, their, well, let me rephrase that, are supposed to try to talk down the person if the person is doing something wrong. They're supposed to try to talk them down because they don't want to use force. They're not supposed to use force. I know there's a whole big debate going on right now in the U.S. about force and different things like that in regards to the police. But the way that I see it, police officers are supposed to try to like de-escalate the problem, and that's what Kirishima was trying to do with the villain, is de-escalate, what was going on, make the villain calm down, so that way they can apprehend him, and so that people don't get hurt. And Kirishima is able to stand up to the guy, but unfortunately the guy still kind of tries to escape, but Fat Gum grabs him and catches him and wears him out by taking the rest of the hits from the villain with the blades. And then he commends he commends Red Riot, he commends Red Riot for standing up to the villain and doing a very great job and everything. And the rest of the civilians are like, oh yeah, what's your hero name? Red Riot. Oh yeah, we're gonna keep an eye out for you. It was impressive, you were awesome, and everything like that. So he gets like compliments and everything. And unfortunately, at the same time, Amajiki ends up getting hit with one of the quark erasing bullets. This is not the permanent kind that Mirio gets hit with later, but this is the temporary kind that just makes his quirk disappear for like so many hours or something like that. And then Kirishima is, very worried because Amajiki's his friend and he doesn't want his friend to be hurt. And they go off, and Amajiki gets looked over and everything, and they all get treated for their wounds, and the villains get arrested and taken to the wherever they go for jail or whatever the case is for the time being. Actually, admittedly, a look into the My Hero Academia legal system would be kind of an interesting thing to see, but I don't know if that's ever going to be taken into account. But that would be kind of an interesting thing to see for how they like work out like different levels of villainy getting different. I know they have different ranks of villains, but like different levels of villainy, villainous actions have different consequences. But what ends up happening is, of course, that is when Kirishima, the next day or the next 2 days later or so, Kirishima and Sue and Ochako and Izuku are all on their way down to where the Night Eye Agency is, which I will pick up after I talk about Izuku. So with Izuku, we of course have it that he of course is going to go and do work study, and he tries calling Gran Torino, or tries his old man shtick again, and he's like, "No, Gran Torino, this is Izuku, Deku. I was wondering, we need to do another work study, and I was wondering if I could come and do my work study with you." And Gran Torino's like, "No, I can't do it with you right now because I'm working on a case and everything, and I can't, working on a case with the police, and I can't do that." We, of course, learn that he's currently helping the detective that's All Might's friend that has the lie detector quirk, trying to track down where Kurogiri and Giganta Machina are. So that way they can try to catch them, working on trying to track down the League of Villains at the time. And he's like, "But why don't you talk to All Might's former sidekick, Night Eye, and see if he would be willing to give you a work study." And Izuku asks All Might to introduce him, and All Might refuses. So then All Might's like, "But Mirio is actually one of Night Eye's interns right now." So then Izuku asks Mirio, and Mirio takes him to go to the Night Eye Agency, where he says, "You need to make Sir laugh. That's what you got to do if you want to try to get in here. You need to make him laugh." And so Izuku's like, "Okay, I can do that." Oh god, Izuku. And they get into the office, and we see Bubble Girl, who is one of the other, who's one of the sidekicks, and she is like attached to this like machine that is tickling her. Well, Night Eye just stands off to the side and just like, "Now we're supposed to make things more entertaining now, aren't we? Give things some levity to it." And I'm just like, okay, Night Eye is interesting. And what ends up happening is, of course, Izuku, Mirio introduces Izuku, and he's like, "Okay, so this is Izuku. He's here wanting to try to get a work study with us and everything." And he takes Bubble Girl out, and then it's Izuku and Night Eye in the office, and Night Eye's like, "I know exactly who you are. You're Izuku Midoriya. You're the one that got All Might's quirk and everything. And I'm gonna do this challenge, and if you can get this stamp for me and stamp the the form in the next 3 minutes, then you can come and be my do your work, your internship here." And so Izuku, of course, is dashing around the room, trying to get a hold of him, trying to work around Night Eye's quirk, which Night Eye's quirk is called, I think it was called a Future Sight or something like that. And he uses the quirk to be able to see where Izuku is going to be within for a certain amount of time frame. So it's kind of, I would just basically put it as if you want to put it in One Piece terms, it's observation hockey that Katakuri has, except he can do it on a much longer scale. And so Izuku's bouncing around the room, trying to avoid all of the different All Might posters and stuff like that are all over the walls. And he's trying to distract Night Eye to get away from try to get the stamp. He did try to make Night Eye laugh at the beginning. He had done an impression of All Might, and Night Eye's just "No, this is not the," he's criticizing his impression of All Might, and he's like, no, this is a very specific version of All Might from when he fell into a lake of vinegar. I'm like, okay, that's just does not sound like a good thing to begin with. And, you know, Night Eye didn't laugh at that. He didn't find that funny. And he's like, you know, Izuku's still jumping around the room. And All Might Night Eye is basically saying he's unimpressed with, you know, All Might's decision to pass on One for All to Izuku. And, you know, he refuses his words and fights on. And after the 3 minutes, confused, Izuku, you know, says that he failed and everything. And Night Eye looks around the room and he sees how carefully Izuku was with his steps to not hit any of like the posters or anything like that were on the walls. And that was enough for Night Eye. And he replies, so it's like, I never said I wouldn't employ the student if you failed. Never said I wouldn't employ you if you failed. He just wanted to challenge him. And he, of course, you know, makes Izuku his intern for the time being. And, you know, then, of course, we get, like, you know, Izuku and Mirio go on patrol a few days later. Night Eye kind of, like, gave them, so it was like, okay, so we're working on this case where we're trying to track down these Yakuza, and the leader of them is this guy called Shihei Asaikai, or Overhaul. I'm just going to say Overhaul because it's easier to pronounce. And we're trying to find him. We think that he is the source of these drugs that are called Trigger that keep getting out on the street. And, you know, they show him a picture of him. And then, you know, Izuku and Mirio head off. And they're on, like, patrolling the route and everything. And then they bump into Eri, who's being chased by Overhaul. And he does the whole thing of, like, oh, you know, she's my daughter. I apologize. She's just, you know, getting out of hand. And she's trying to have fun and everything. And, you know, Mirio and Izuku both see how terrified Eri is. You know, trying to escape him and is like terrified and shaking, and they see the bandages all up and down her arms. And I am going to do a video on Eri. That is one of the, like, the 10 good, 1 bad, which more for Eri is more like 10 bad, 1 good videos in regards to that. And I will go over Eri at some point in one of those videos. But what ends up happening is, you know, Mirio is just kind of like trying to play it off as like, oh, so yeah, this is your kid. It's nice to meet you, sir. You know, being very polite, and, you know, he's trying, you know, clearly he's trying to get Eri back from, Overhaul is trying to get Eri back from Izuku because she's just like clinging to Izuku. And when, you know, Overhaul walks away, she realizes that, oh, he's about to use his quirk to hurt these two, and she doesn't want that. And she runs back after him and everything. And Night Eye explains to them kind of the way that, you know, Mirio had explained to Izuku, is like, you can't act rashly when it comes to this. And what ends up happening is, of course, he explains that, yeah, I kind of knew that you were going to run into, you know, Overhaul, but now we kind of have a way to track him down. And, or like, oh, so he has a daughter. Well, we didn't know that. So they put that into the file and everything. And then, like, several days later, you know, this is when Izuku and Kirishima and Sue and Ochako are all going to the same place, and they run into the, you know, the big three, and they all go into the Night Eye agency, and they see Fat Gum there, and Aizawa, and a whole bunch of these other heroes there, and like Fat Gum and such, and you know, Ryuko and everything are all there. And Night Eye brings them all in, and he's explaining, okay, so here's the thing. We have managed to gather as much information as we can about what's going on with the Asaikai, with, you know, the 8th precinct and everything. And, you know, this is the different things that we have. This, you know, it's giving them all the information that they have, and like talking about their plan of like going in and like finding their way into the base, and, you know, getting, you know, Overhaul and defeating him and everything. And then mentioning, you know, there's this girl, and Izuku and Mirio both kind of have this moment where it's like, where they realize that, oh, she's been in trouble this entire time. And they're just like both blaming themselves, of course, for the fact that they let the child, you know, they let this girl go back into harm's way, and they couldn't do anything about it at the time. And they're supposed to be heroes. So they get this whole bunch of, like, you know, blaming themselves and everything. And the rest of the heroes are just like, well, there's a little girl in trouble, so of course we have to help her. And, you know, but they're all like discussing the different merits of like what they should do and how they should set this raid up and everything. You know, Aizawa is there and everything, because of his, you know, in his capacity as a hero, not as his capacity as a teacher. And Izuku and the others, of course, the other work study / interns, after the meeting is kind of over, when they're like sitting around, it's, all of them talking. Like Aizawa comes over and he's kind of like saying, I understand the way that you're feeling. I understand that you want to help the girl and everything. But there's also news that the possibility that the League of Villains might be part of this. And if they are, then that's a little too close to anything else that you guys have been involved in right now, between the, the USJ and between, Katsuki being kidnapped and everything. We're going to have to see what we can do. But if it is revealed that they are part of this, then you guys cannot be a part of this. And they're like, we understand that, but we still want to help this girl. And this is one of the moments where it's like, we do get the time where it's like, it's going to hit home. That he explains to them, there is going to be a time when not like the for the greater good, like letting Eri go back to him is not necessarily for the greater good. But it gives them a drive to want to go and save her. And that sometimes being a hero, you do have to make the hard choices. And yeah, that's not an easy thing to do. Hence why they're hard choices, of course. But, he's trying to help them understand that. And it's partly his capacity as a teacher, partly his capacity as a hero. And it's just, he needs them to understand that there's a lot more than just going out and beating up the villains. There is also the, the investigative work and everything, which of course we kind of see some of that during this time frame with like the different heroes investigating what's going on at the, for the Yakuza and everything. And, we see that, and that's something else I'll be going over in like the different aspects of being a hero video. But one of the things that we, do see is that, the kids aren't too involved in that setup of things. It's mostly like the rest of the sidekicks and heroes themselves that are all involved in this. And eventually, one night, the night before the raid, or like the night 2 days or so before the raid, they get a call that says, okay, we all need to be, here at this point in time. And they find out that, okay, so Night Eye had used his quirk to be able to figure out where Eri was, because he came across this like thug looking guy trying to buy like these kid toys. And then he used his quirk to like kind of, follow the guy, quote unquote, and see what he was going to do. And he sees how, where Eri is, and he uses that as a way to, give them a location for where the Hasaikai are, where the, where the Yakuza are, and where Overhaul is. And they use that to determine, okay, so at 8:30 on this day, this is when we're going to go in. And like they have all the heroes there, Aizawa, there's another one there that's called, I think it's called Rocklock or something like that. And, all these other heroes and the sidekicks and such are there. And they're ready to go in and attack the, the Shihei Saikai hideouts, headquarters. And they get there and, they force their way in and they start fighting their way in. And it's, Izuku is going in with Night Eye and Fat Gum, and Mirio and Amajiki are all going in and are all heading in. And Aizawa is with them as well, along with a few others. And then Ryuko and her and the girls are outside, kind of helping deal with like some of the ones that are outside. Because admittedly, Sue's quirk can be good for working inside. Same thing with Araka's quirk can be quite good for working inside. But their mentor right now is a giant dragon woman, and her quirk is probably not the best for when it comes to working inside of confined areas. So she would just have to, her being outside makes sense. Plus, Nejire can kind of fly around, so her being able to do that helps with, trying to contain the villain. And they're trying to fight against this giant villain that also has, like, the ability, I think he has, like, the ability to, like, drain stamina from people. So they're, like, trying to fight him and everything. And they do end up finally getting able to take him down. I think it's, like, Nejire that actually kind of, like, delivers the final blow or something like that, or that allows Ryuko to get the upper hand in the battle. And they are able to defeat him. So we get like this, great things of like the girls having to work together, which I love. And then inside the base, of course, Izuku and the others are, Izuku and Kirishima And, Night Eye and Mirio and Amajiki and Fat Gum and Izawa, along with a few of the others, are all running their way through the base. And of course, the base starts to get warped and everything. And Mirio goes on ahead because he can pass through the walls. And he's making his way to where, Overhaul is. And he starts fighting Overhaul in order to protect Eri. And Eri, he uses his cape to like wrap Eri in that and protect her and everything, and like he's taking all of these different hits so that way she doesn't get hit, using his quirk to of course avoid getting actually injured, and keeping Eri out of the way as he jumps and dodges around all of the different spikes and everything that Overhaul's making pop out of the ground. And at the same time, Izuku is kind of dealing with a few little things, but it's mostly this is where we get Kirishima's fight. We do see Amajiki have to fight as well, and he ends up fighting against 3 different precinct members. That one of them has like this like weird like crystalline quirk or something like that, and Amajiki ends up eating that and using that with his own power, and is able to defeat the villains that way. And then we get Kirishima, Red Riot's fight, which is him paired with Fat Gum against these 2 precinct members. One of them has like this strength type quirk. I don't remember exactly what the strength quirk is, but he has he has a strength quirk, and then this other one has the ability to create barriers. Considering I talked about One Piece very recently, and I talked about the Bari Bari no Mi, that was fun. And like, so it's like they're a good pair. So it's just like the kind of like this, immovable wall, the barrier with this very strong guy, and then Fat Gum also kind of acts as like a barrier, but so can Kirishima, and then Fat Gum can also, absorb all of these attacks. And we get this moment where this is where we get some of the flashbacks for Kirishima, of course, during some of this. And during this arc is where we get a lot of the flashbacks for Kirishima, him flashbacking, whatever. Him remembering, when he was in middle school with Mina and everything, and seeing the way she acted. And then, of course, him, his inspiration from Crimson Riot and everything along those lines. And, what ends up happening is he kind of goes into his unbreakable mode again. But it's even kind of stronger to a degree at this point in time, and he's just like taking the blows, which gives Fat Gum the ability to, because it takes him a little bit to like get to the ability where he can release all of the pent up power that he's built up. And he does, he, gathers up that energy, and then he just forces it out of himself into like, I think it's like a couple of punches or so is I think the way that he tends to deliver it, into the very, very strong villain, and knocks him to the side. And we get a little bit of the backstory of the villain as well, which is kind of interesting, and it ties into something else that we've seen happen in Vigilantes recently in a flashback there, if I remember correctly. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. But of course, Kirishima, of course, ends up, getting a bunch of, gets fairly badly injured during this fight, unfortunately, but he impressed the Saikai member who's like, come on, get him fixed and everything. I want to fight him again. And like, I'll take you to where like the first aid stuff is. And like, he even ties up, I don't remember if he's the one that ties up his associate or if it's Fat Gum that ties up the associate. But he wants to fight Kirishima again. And so it's like he lets Fat Gum treat his injuries, which of course, it just basically ends up him getting like arrested later anyway. So it's both of the Hasaikai get arrested. But then we cut back to where Izuku is, and Izuku eventually does find his way to where Mirio is. And where Mirio and Eri are, and he's like, jumping around and trying, sees Mirio get hurt and everything, because Mirio, of course, gets hit by one of the permanent quirk erasing bullets, unfortunately. And so he can't, phase and, permeate through everything anymore. So he has to, like, take these attacks head on and protect Eri. And of course, Izuku shows up, and he helps get Mirio out of there, and like Night Eye is there, and I don't remember if it's Izuku fights him first or if it's Night Eye that fights him first. One of the two, but like Night Eye shows up, and like he's so proud of the way that Mirio had been fighting and everything to protect Eri, and Izuku carries Mirio and Eri into the pathway so that way they're out of the way. you know, and you know, Mirio just is, you know, he doesn't have his quirk right now, and he's kind of, you know, very angry about this. He's not angry at Eri by any means. I don't think Mirio would ever have the ability to get angry at Eri. But like Eri's, of course, blaming herself because of everything that's gone with her life, and of course, I'll go over more of that when I talk about like Eri herself in like her own video. But what ends up happening is, of course, Izuku goes back in, and like Night Eye had been trying to fight, you know, Overhaul, and that doesn't go well, unfortunately, and he ends up taking a spike through the chest, which is not good. And you know, Izuku is then fighting Overhaul, and like Overhaul is just like, he's like merging himself with like other things because he can do that. Admittedly, Overhaul's quirk is freaking awesome. Overhaul's quirk is amazing. I admit that entirely. He's a horrible human being, but his quirk is awesome. Which is like, it's like, you know, you look at like a whole bunch of the villains who's like, well, you're a horrible person, but your quirk is amazing. But you know, quirks and person don't always match. But that's a different video. But what ends up happening is, of course, Izuku, you know, kind of tries to save Night Eye and like kind of gets into a little bit of a safer spot, and then he's the one that, of course, ends up having to fight Overhaul. And you know, Eri kind of wanders back in at one point during the fight because she's like, Overhaul said, you know, it's like, if you just come back, Eri, then I'll let them go and nobody else will get hurt. Because, of course, he's kind of like conditioned her. Again, different video. And Izuku sees Eri come back in, and he knows that if she goes back to Overhaul, she's just going to go back to more and more pain, and he can't let that happen, of course. And he then, you know, he grabs her and he uses Mirio's cloak that they had, and he like ties Eri to himself. At one point during this battle, Ryuku kind of just like fell through the floor, well, ceiling that was the street, and like landed into the area where they were fighting. And that caused some, you know, that kind of helped give a slight relief into what was going on, and it let them get, you know, Night Eye out of there and get Mirio out of there to a degree. But Izuku had like Eri like tied to him with the cape and everything. And he ends up, you know, this is when, of course, Eri kind of activates her quirk, because Izuku just like keeps breaking his body over and over and over again when he's doing his, you know, Manchester smash and everything, and you know, beating down Hasaikai, and all of these, you know, powers where you can just go like full 100% full cowling and not have to worry about, you know, his body not being able to heal So like Eri is continuously healing him while he's fighting. And, you know, it does work. He is able to beat down Overhaul. And, you know, we do find out that, you know, the League is there because, like, Twice and Himiko are there, you know, Toga are there. But that's not really, I mean, it affects what's going on, but it's not necessarily something that, like, Izuku ever finds out about, I don't think. Or if he does find out about it, it's, like, later on. It does make a difference in what happens, but it's kind of like okay, moving on. But like Izuku is able to, you know, use this, you know, 100% full cowling to, you know, just like eventually beat down Overhaul, and he gets him into the air so that way Overhaul can't like, you know, absorb anything from the ground or do anything like that. And he's able to, you know, smash down, you know, Overhaul and eventually defeat him. Uraraka, of course, got Night Eye to safety, and Sue had found Ozawa, who unfortunately had kind of been incapacitated. And unfortunately, during the same time frame as once they get Overhaul defeated, Eri's quirk is kind of going out of control, and they have to use Ozawa to kind of like, you know, she kind of like Froki has to like force Ozawa's head to look at where Izuku is, because Ozawa is kind of frozen. Because of one of the other League or the Hasaikai members. And he, you know, he deactivates Eri's quirk and everything, so that way she can just, you know, the quirk will stop, because if it keeps going, then it will basically like erase Izuku, which is not good. We cut to, you know, them getting all the injured out of there. Night Eye, unfortunately, has still, you know, he's still got this spike in his chest, which is not good. And, you know, he has to be treated and he's being taken to the hospital. And of course, Kirishima got very badly beat up. Izuku got beat up. Mirio got beat up. The three girls seem fine. Majiki comes back. Fat Gum kind of got beat up a fair amount. But, you know, they all go to the hospital and they're all getting treated and everything, of course. And Kirishima just gets like bandaged up like a mummy, which is kind of funny. And of course, during this time frame is when, unfortunately, Nahadai is dying. He's like on his deathbed. He's got like all these tubes coming out of him. And this is when, you know, All Might shows up. And All Might is, you know, I went over this in the All Might videos that I did. And, you know, this is where they're kind of able to like fix their friendship that would have been nice if they were able to fix beforehand, as opposed to Night-Eye having to die in order for them to like fix their relationship. And, you know, it's kind of like this, you know, it also shows you that hero work does come with regrets. And that's another lesson, because like Izuku is in there when this happens. Kirishima and Sue and Araka are not, but they do hear about it. And of course, Night-Eye uses his quirk on Mirio one last time, and I think it's more, and like we don't see what Night-Eye sees. It's more, I think it's supposed to imply that he does see this hope for the future, because like Izuku changed the future, and Izuku changing the future can have major ramifications. And you know, Night-Eye does not want All Might to die. He does not want Mirio to be stuck without his quirk. But I think when he did his, you know, used his quirk for the last time to, you know, look at Mirio's future, he did see that, I think he sees that, like, Mirio gets his quirk back from Eri because Eri's able to help him. And, like, he sees Mirio as this great hero, which I would be perfectly fine with Mirio becoming number one as well. Admittedly, I don't think the like number one hero ranking system that they do is necessarily a good idea, because obviously it, you know, pits heroes against each other, kind of like what happened with, you know, Endeavor and All Might. But I don't think Izuku and Mirio would have that same problem, but I don't necessarily think that like hero ranking system is necessarily a good idea with everything that, you know, goes down and everything. It puts this weight on like those that are at the top, and I've gone over that a little bit in I think a different video, but it puts this weight on people that then just, you know, makes it even harder for them to be this hero, because they have to be this symbol as well. And you know, having one pillar holding everything up does not work. Having a bunch of equal pillars holding everything up is better. And like I think Night-Eye sees Mirio as like this great hero, and like maybe sees like Izuku there with him as like, you know, him, you know, them as great heroes. Or maybe he sees this future where it's just like all of the students become great heroes, which would also be good. You know, something that references kind of what happened recently in the manga with like Ochako, showing that she can't, you know, showing that everyone can be a hero, that it's not just the heroes and the students, it's the civilians as well. But, you know, unfortunately, you know, Night-Eye dies, and Izuku and Mirio, of course, you know, all of the kids mourn and everything, and they're at the funeral for him and everything, and, like, Fat Gum's there as well. But, you know, so that's where we get for those for their internships. Now let's move on to slightly something a little more lighthearted, a little bit. That's the remedial license training, which is, of course, where Kazukiki and Shoto have to go during this time frame. Well, for quite a while. And what they have to do is, of course, they're there doing training, and they have to deal with, you know, Inasa, or a Whirlwind, and Kami. And, you know, you know, the four of them are the main ones that this little, you know, remedial license exam arc focuses on. And during the time frame when they're there, Shoto is, of course, seeing a little bit more of his father. Endeavor is there, and this kind of starts to align a little bit with, like, Endeavor's, you know, shifting ideas and everything. But what we get to see is the four of them, the four students, have to deal with this entire group of, like, I think they're like kindergartners or like first graders, or they're like really little elementary school kids, and like they have to deal with them because like these kids are just nothing but trouble for their teacher. And he's like, I think it's like Gang Orca that's there, and it's like, you must reach these children's hearts. It's like, what? So it's just like they're already ready to fight and prepared to fight these villains, and then it's just like there's a bunch of kids run in, and they're just like, huh? This is not what I was expecting. And then of course, like, the kids are all little brats and everything. And there's one kid there that basically looks like he could be like Monoma's little brother. But like all of the kids are brats, and they just are being very rude to the heroes in training, to the kids. And like we get Present Mike in the background, like doing audio commentary on what's going on, which is funny. And like eventually they are able to get through to the kids via the kids just like acting like little horrible little demons, and like showing off their quirks and everything, because like they're like, oh, our quirks are amazing and everything, and like we're just going to be even better heroes than you. And part of it is, as I think Katsuki sees some of himself in these kids too. But the group, the kids end up, the students end up getting through to the kids, and like they use the kids' quirks to make this like fun slide type thing that I really like. And like they do bond with the kids and like reach through to them, which helps helps the Shoto and Katsuki kind of like loosen up a little bit. I don't really know. I don't think we've seen the students, these kids from the class again. I don't think we have. Maybe in the future we might see them again, but at the moment we haven't. That's about what we have for this one. The next internship video will, of course, be me talking about the third round of internships, which is the mandatory round, which is, of course, when Izuku, Shoto, and Katsuki are all at the Endeavor Agency during that time frame. And of course, where the rest of the students are all off at different agencies as well, because that's a mandatory one. So that's what we have for that. I thank you very much for watching. I apologize if there's a lot of cuts because of my allergies, but I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. Why don't we get started? There's a child in need out there. That's what matters most.